A luxurious house, a vain wife, a baby crying from hunger, and a housekeeper with milk in her breast. What would you do if you caught your employee breastfeeding your child? He didn't yell, he didn't curse, he chose, and that choice was the beginning of the scandal. If this story surprised you, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any content. Let's begin. The impeccable home in the Beverly Hills penthouse. Everything gleamed, from the white marble in the living room to the sterilized diapers that never saw a drop of milk. David Thompson, the boss, was an executive of short phrases who only returned home after dinner was already cold. His wife, Victoria, an ex-nail polish ad model, spent her days between lymphatic drainage sessions and selfies in the mirror. Their newborn daughter cried in an Italian-designed crib, surrounded by nannies who changed shifts like changing nail polish. With indifference, in the midst of this home decor magazine scene, there was Maria, the housekeeper, without a degree or pretense. She was the only constant in that house of absences. She arrived before sunrise and left when the moon was already peeking out. She cleaned with a surgeon's precision, but it was in her gaze that her tenderness resided, a gaze that rested longer on the child than on any piece of furniture in the house, and it was she, with washerwoman's hands and a mother's heart, who rocked the girl in the cold early hours when no one else heard the crying. The dry milk Victoria claimed a milk allergy, though her biggest allergy was to sacrifice. "I didn't want to get out of shape," she told her friends. "Breastfeeding makes your breasts sag, you know," she proclaimed with her eyes glued to the mirror. David didn't comment. When he was home, which was rare, he pretended not to hear, and so, between the luxury of indifference and the silence of the employees, the girl nursed less and less and cried more and more. In the house where everything was bought, even silence had a price tag. Victoria remained impeccable, thin as a dry twig, the result of lunatic diets and collagen kale smoothies. She claimed she didn't produce enough milk, when in reality she didn't even produce enough patience. At night, she left the girl in the care of nannies, but none stayed for more than a week. The culprit, the crying, an insistent cry, a plea of hunger that pierced through the drywall and lodged itself in Maria's heart. The housekeeper, who had been a mother of 3 and buried 2, recognized that sound as intimately as her own voice. She knew the difference between a whiny cry and a scream of hunger. She tried to warn the madam once, twice. She received back a look of disdain, as if she had dared to point out a flaw in a display window. "It's colic, it's a phase, it will pass," they said, but it didn't. The child withered in the nanny's arms, and Maria felt that every tear was a plea no one answered. It was on a muggy night, when the girl no longer had the strength to even wail, that Maria gave in. She picked up the baby, went to the service room, and with trembling hands unbuttoned her blouse. She still had milk, a remnant of a recent miscarriage, a secret she hadn't shared with anyone. The girl sucked ferociously, as if recognizing the breast that wasn't hers, and for the first time in days, she slept. Maria stood there, motionless, caught between sin and salvation. Maria's milk. Since that clandestine night, the routine gained a new time zone. Maria waited for the house to fall silent, for the madam to sleep with her skin coated in creams, for the boss to snore in the next room. Then, stealthily, she crossed the hallway with the girl in her arms, heading to the stuffy service room, where there was no air conditioning, but there was milk. It was there, among cheap sheets and peeling saints on the wall, that the baby found the comfort the big house denied her. Maria's breasts swelled with milk and with guilt. It wasn't her daughter, and precisely because of that, perhaps the gesture was even more painful. Every feeding was a dirty secret, a crime without witnesses. She was afraid, of course, afraid of being caught, of being called crazy by those people who saw poverty as a genetic defect. But above fear was instinct, and instinct, when it screams, asks no permission. The child's body began to change. Her cheeks rounded. Her eyes became livelier. Victoria boasted, the imported formula is working. Maria listened silently, biting back the urge to laugh or cry. She felt she was not just feeding a baby, but a moral abyss growing in that house. She knew she was crossing an invisible boundary, but she also knew that sometimes only the forbidden saves. The discovery David left work early that grey Tuesday, without warning. He rode up the elevator, caressing his car key, unaware that at that very moment he would lose the illusion of control over his own home. The silence in the apartment was the first oddity. Not a common afternoon silence, but a maternal silence. Warm, calm, almost humid. A lullaby silence. He followed this sonic void like someone sniffing out a mystery. He passed through the living room, the bedroom, the kitchen. Nothing. When he reached the back hallway, he heard a faint, almost imperceptible sound, rhythmic, intimate, ancestral sucking. He slowly opened the service room door and stopped there. Before him, the housekeeper Maria, sitting, her breast exposed, and his daughter, latched onto that breast with the hunger of someone who had found the world. Time froze. David paled, his breath caught in his chest. Maria, in a delayed reflex, tried to cover herself, push the child away, justify the impossible. But no sound escaped her lips, and David also remained silent. He merely looked like someone witnessing a sacred crime. Then he turned his back, left in silence, his heart pounding erratically, and his face pale as a corpse still breathing. The silent confrontation. Maria still held the girl in her arms when she ran after him, stumbling over her own feet in despair. "Mr. Thompson, for God's sake, it's not what it looks like. I didn't mean any harm." The words came out in sobs. She wanted to explain, to tell him about the nights of crying, about the madam's dry milk, about the pain of seeing the child waste away, but her voice was thin, trembling, and shattered before it could form any coherent argument. David stopped in the middle of the living room, looking at Maria as if he saw a ghost. There was no hatred on his face, no little pity. There was something worse, an emptiness, an unblinking gaze that didn't accuse, but burned. A heavy silence, like a closed coffin. Maria, standing, her blouse poorly buttoned, tried to find some sign of clemency in her boss's eyes. But there was no clemency. There was astonishment. An astonishment that didn't shout, but crushed. He slowly turned his face, like someone waking from a bad dream. He crossed the hallway without a word, opened his bedroom door, and entered. Maria stood there, paralyzed, feeling the breath of the sleeping baby in her lap. No scandal, no dismissal, no scolding, just that thick, rotten silence, impossible to decipher. And what terrified her most was precisely that. The boss hadn't reacted like a man. He had reacted like an enigma. The female counsel David ate dinner in silence, chewing each mouthful as if it were glass. Victoria, who only paid attention to her husband when he deviated from the script, quickly noticed. "You're acting strange, David. Did something happen at work?" He responded with a vague nod. But she insisted a little more until he dropped his cutlery and blurted out, "I caught Maria breastfeeding our daughter," he said emotionlessly, like someone reporting a plane crash. Victoria choked on her wine, her eyes wide, but not because of the child. "What? Breastfeeding in my house?" Her indignation came from the deepest place of vanity. The idea of a poor woman, and worse, with a vulgarly fertile body, breastfeeding her daughter, sounded like a desecration. "Do you know what people will say if this gets out? The neighbors, the press, they'll think we're barbarians," she repeated, as if the problem were the headline, not the child's hunger. David remained silent, elbows on the table, eyes fixed on his empty plate. Victoria then stood up, went to her phone, and wrote something in a leather agenda. "Tomorrow this woman leaves. No scene, no scandal. I'll give her a check, if necessary." She sat back down as if she had solved a domestic issue, like replacing a curtain. David didn't say a word, but at that exact moment, he decided he would do the opposite of what she ordered. David's choice. The sun had barely risen when Maria walked down the stairs with her suitcase in her hands. Her eyes were swollen and her heart was pounding. She expected public humiliation, dismissal with a pointed finger. She was sure Victoria would have security escort her to the gate like a thief. "You're not leaving." Maria froze. "As far as I'm concerned, you're staying. But no one can know. No one." The phrase hit her like lightning from a clear sky. David, who until yesterday was a mannequin in expensive suits, now spoke like an accomplice. "I want you to continue for her sake, for the girl's sake." Maria didn't answer. She fell to her knees on the plush carpet and cried like a child. She cried from relief, from fear, from guilt. She cried because she hadn't expected clemency from that man. But what about Mrs. Victoria? David narrowed his eyes and replied, "She doesn't need to know everything." It was the first time Maria saw something akin to tenderness in her boss's eyes. And however absurd it seemed, at that moment the secret turned into a pact. The announced scandal, all it took was a sliver of a poorly closed door, an ill-timed nap, and the secret spilled like lukewarm milk down the building's stairs. The new cook, a gossip by vocation and a Catholic by convenience, saw the scene. Maria with her blouse open, the girl at her breast, eyes closed in maternal pleasure. She said nothing at the time, of course, but by the end of her shift, her mouth was an open confessional at the corner bakery. "I saw it with my own two eyes," she repeated to anyone who would listen. In a few hours, the entire neighborhood knew. The madam's daughter nurses from the housekeeper's breast. The phrase gained substance, tone, scorn. The neighbors, who until then had discreetly envied Victoria's life, now chuckled under their breath. Imagine poor people's milk. She grew up thinking she's from the slums. The scandal spread like a virus, and no one wore a mask. Victoria found out from an anonymous call. She slammed the phone on the table so hard she broke a nail. She ran through the rooms like a headless chicken, screaming David's name. He listened in silence, arms crossed. The house, which had once been a stage for dinners and baby showers, became the epicenter of whispers. The employees whispered among themselves, the neighbors feigned greetings, and Maria just lowered her head with the dignity of someone who knows they are right, even when the whole world says they're not. The outcome and the moral Victoria exploded like an actress in a bad soap opera finale. She broke dishes, threatened to sue half the world, yelled at her daughter, yes, at her daughter, for having nursed from another's breast. She called Maria a miserable cow, a hormonal invader, and other names that not even the relatives in the house could suppress. She demanded Maria's immediate dismissal in front of David. "It's either her or me, David, choose," she shrieked, eyes wide and voice choked with hysteria. David, in silence, lit a cigarette, then put it out. He hadn't smoked in years. He rose from the armchair like someone rising from a tomb. He walked to Victoria, looked deep into those eyes, made up with desperation, and said, "Then go pack your things." She laughed, thinking he was bluffing, but he wasn't. "You're fired from this house, from this daughter, from this whole charade." And he completed with a cold voice, like a scalpel, "Maria is the only mother this girl has ever known." Victoria, left in shock, dragging suitcases and pride down the stairs. The news spread faster than a fire in a shantytown. The entire street knew and judged. Of course, they judged. They said he traded his wife for the housekeeper, but no one knew about the child's hunger or the milk that saved her life. Maria remained there in silence, nursing and caring. The new madame, without heels, without a degree, but with milk in her breasts and tenderness in her eyes, and the scandal that became a legend. And for today, we'll stop here. Tell us in the comments what you thought of this story, and don't forget to follow the channel and turn on notifications. By doing so, you help us ensure this content reaches more people. Thank you for your presence, and see you next time.